Okay, so first of all, I'm going to tell you my answer to number one. Right now, I'm feeling very nervous. But anyway, I'm very grateful to Creative Mornings for giving me this opportunity, and I'm very happy to see so many people here to see my work. I do think that photography is an ideal vehicle for preserving. And I think also that the task of a photographer is to figure out what they want to preserve with their work. So I'm going to kind of go through my history as a photographer and some of I would characterize it, maybe not struggles, but grappling with the idea of what I wanted to preserve in my work. Let me see. So I grew up with a father who loved the outdoors, and from a very early age, I was always with him on his fishing and hunting trips, and I just became a real lover of nature, I guess you would say. But I didn't take pictures. I really didn't take pictures until actually I was in the Army in Germany, and I was able to buy at that time inexpensive but very good 35 millimeter camera. And I started taking pictures over in Europe, not very good pictures, but I was just kind of learning how to do it. But I decided that I wanted to become a professional photographer. So I went to art school. I went to the San Francisco Art Institute, and I learned a lot about art. As it turned out, not a whole lot about photography, which I didn't really know at the time. But when I came back to Richmond and got a job working in a camera store, and just by some weird coincidence, I was in a bar. Poor Richards, does anybody remember Poor Richards? I was in a bar and I bumped into two young guys who were art directors at the Martin Agency. And we were drinking beer and talking about life and art and all that stuff. And they invited me to come and show my portfolio, which I really didn't have, to the Martin Agency. So I brought in a box of prints, and I wouldn't say hired me because there was no money involved, but it was a pro bono assignment where I did public service ads for the Martin Agency. And I was very fortunate to be able to photograph something I really loved, which was the Richmond Symphony. I'm a classical music fan. So the Richmond Symphony, Jacques Houtman was the conductor, Andre Watts was the pianist, and they were doing Beethoven's Emperor Concerto. And I was sitting in the orchestra photographing Jacques Houtman. So that was a real thrill. And based on that pro bono assignment, I decided to quit my job at the camera store and become a commercial photographer. So I made a portfolio, and I made a portfolio in just the opposite way that I later came to realize one should make a portfolio. I made a portfolio from the outside in and not from the inside out. I tried to figure out what people wanted me to do, and so I put a little of everything in this portfolio. I got some jobs. Some of them I didn't do very well and didn't enjoy doing. And finally, an art director told me, he picked out 2 or 3 pictures in my portfolio and said, "These are the best things you have. I think you should do more of this." and they happen to be outdoor photographs, landscape kind of photographs. So that brings me to this picture here, which actually was not, this is actually much later in my career that I did this. I did this for Santa Fe Tourism, and it was to advertise the galleries in Santa Fe, the landscape galleries. So it's really one of my favorite jobs that I ever did for an ad agency. But I started with this picture I made. It ended up being, I didn't make it I made it on my own. It was for my portfolio. But it ended up being used by Dominion Resources and a lot of other people, actually. And the thing about this picture is, even to this day, I think like almost everything about this picture, if I could have directed God to do things, it would have looked like this. You know, the color of the interior of that house, the placement of the boat, the mist on the water that made the horizon sort of disappear, all of that made this picture what it is. But I really can't take much credit for it because it just was, that's the way it was when I got there. I did recognize it though, and I recognized what was good about it. So I started working as a photographer, doing a lot of landscape work. By the way, I've got a shout out to Tyler Darden because he was the art director for this Virginia Living picture. Again, there's a little serendipity here because the picnic table and the bird and some of these things were just there. We drove this tiny home into this, I guess it was like a big campground, and we saw these props, so we just used them. It was kind of funny too because just as we were leaving, the owner pulled up. And we just kind of drove away as quickly as possible. Whoops. Yikes. What did I do? I think I hit the wrong button, obviously. There we go. Another client, and I know I've got to talk faster than this because I got a lot of pictures, but another client that I did a lot of work for was one of the sponsors, Worth Higgins Printers. They gave me a lot of really wonderful work because I was just asked to just make beautiful photographs to show off their printers. So I did a series called The Wider Views. I shot with a panoramic camera and film, and they made these beautiful, huge banner-like prints. Did it again. Where did you hit? Okay. So another client of mine was Virginia Tourism, and they also gave me a lot of really great assignments traveling around the state. Again, photographing the things I love to photograph. So I guess the point that I really want to make before I forget it is I learned to work from the inside out. And as soon as I learned to do that and I learned to photograph the things that I was passionate about, everything changed for me. I mean, dramatically and almost immediately, everything changed for me. This is the picture I did fairly recently for LL Bean when they moved to Richmond to Short Pump. So I got another assignment, actually from Tyler Darden again, for Virginia Living, and they ran these pictures in color. They didn't, and it was beautiful in color, but I decided I wanted to change it to black and white. So I made a series of pictures where I converted them to black and white and did some other things, kind of converted it to a little bit of infrared look. But the important thing that I wanted to mention is that I started looking at landscapes more like portraits, trying to find the element in the landscape that I really wanted to be the figure against the ground. And that translated into a lot of work that I've started to do. This series was a personal series, mostly on the James River. It was about nature and culture. I was trying to balance what man has done to nature, sometimes harmoniously and sometimes not so harmoniously. This picture was just in a show the Sierra Club did. This is probably one of the least harmonious of the pictures in that series. It's kind of interesting when I compare it to the use of lighting in the boat, the house on the water shot. Seems very different feeling to it. This is the last landscape I'm going to show because this really sort of leads directly into this project that I've been working on for about 4 years now. And it concerns, well, this is interesting because I took this picture for Ed Slipik's magazine years ago. And this is Myron Helfgott in 1985, I think. And I think this planted a seed of interest in portraits of artists a long time ago, and it took all this time for me to get serious about doing it. So this is Myron Helfgott now, and he's if those of you who don't know him, he's a sculptor. He taught at VCU for many, many years. Really a brilliant guy. So I started doing these, preserving the memories of these artists in Richmond. I teach at VCU, and I know from teaching there that a lot of the students and even the faculty don't know these people, which is shocking to me. The memory is very short. This is Frances Wessels, who is a dancer. She was 99 years old when I took this picture, and she had been dancing for about 15 or 20 minutes before I took it with Robbie Kittner, I think that's how his name is pronounced, who is her dance partner. He's about 40. This is Willie Ann Wright, who is in her 90s. I would say probably the most important art photographer in Richmond. She mainly worked with a pinhole camera, or works with a pinhole camera. George Nan, anybody who's been in the photo department at VCU knows him. He started the photo department at VCU. Just as an explanation, those pictures that are hanging around his neck are Polaroids that he took of the tree that he's standing in front of. Harold North sort of started the sculpture department. Harold passed away earlier, probably 6 months ago or so, but he was in his 90s also. That's a hand grenade, or a giant model of a hand grenade. He fought in the Korean War. Eleanor Rufty, wonderful painter. Charcoal, this is a huge charcoal drawings. They're really beautiful. Bernard Martin. I can't talk about everybody because I'm going to run out of time, I know. Joe Seipel, this is an interesting picture because Joe was the dean of the School of Arts at VCU and became sort of overwhelmed by being an administrator. And this is kind of the tyranny of it. This is his own way of expressing his ambivalence, I think, about losing his time as an artist to being an administrator. He's back to being an artist again now. Jack Glover, woodcut artist. This David Freed, wonderful landscape painter. John Roy, who was also the head of the photo department at VCU. I photographed him at the VMFA. That's the parking deck behind him. The reason we did that is he had a series of pictures of, I guess you'd call it corporate landscaping pictures. So I wanted him to be like a tree in that environment. Dennis Winston, another really wonderful woodcut artist. Joanna Arnold, that's a sculpture that she did of Willie Ann and Jack Wright. They were the models for that. Now, one thing I want to mention is the thing about working with artists and I got this from actually working with art directors also. Collaboration with these artists has been wonderful because they're such creative people. Lester's a funny guy, so this was as much his idea as it was mine. It's Tom Chenoweth. I'm getting the hook is about to come out here, so I'm going to have to speed up. This is Rob Carter. I'll say one thing about him. He's helping me design a book, which hopefully, if I can get the money, will be a book of all these portraits. Tom Daniels, anybody know him? He's a great photographer, a crazy guitar player. This is Medford Taylor, who teaches at Sweetbriar. He was a National Geographic photographer. Just a fabulous photographer. Richard Bland, painter, collector of stuff, and this is where he lives. He lives in this place. I always thought it looked like a Harry Potter set. Dale Quarterman, Aggie Zed, fantastic artist. Her work involves people and animals. Gary Johnson, another real character. He used to do photography. His photos sold at Mongrels. They're sort of funny greeting card pictures. Alan Jones, photographer for VCU. Darryl Starr, man of many talents. He was a sculptor and an actor. I got it this time. Wolfgang Jasper. I do learn, people. Wolfgang Jasper with his dog who sat there the whole time that we took pictures just like that, and finally I decided that should be the picture, so we took one. David White. I'm really moving fast here. Amy Oliver. Gordon Stettinius, and this is a great example of collaboration because if any of you know this story, Gordon had Terry Brown take all these pictures of him, and it took about 15 years to do it because he actually grew his hair and shaved it and did all that stuff. So we left one space to put the real Gordon in there at the end. Diego Sanchez. Alex Nurgis, real job is running the museum, the VMFA. He's a very avid photographer, though. My friend Bob Griffith, I shared a studio with for many years, filmmaker. Scott Elmquist, Style magazine photographer. Ronald Lee and Michael Pierce, and that's Michael on the left, and Ronald's a painting that Michael did of Ronald Pierce on the right. Vinny Gonzalez and his various creations. Tennessee Dixon, what a great name. She's a set designer. Does a lot of stuff at the Firehouse Theater. Lucia Mendocino. Chris Burnside, another dancer. This was a great shoot. He was all over that tree. David Everett, my friend, who I see on the river frequently. Okay, the last few pictures I've done in Petersburg. This is Ignatius Creegan, the hat maker. I don't know if any of you know him or not. Wonderful hats. Rod Gibbons, his partner, a painter. Ron Walton, he's a painter. The Walton Gallery in Petersburg. And last but not least, Olamina. I keep forgetting his name. I want to call him Wilhelmina. Olamina, who is a reggae performer and a painter. That's his painting in the background there. So anyway, that's about it. But I just want to reiterate a few points that I feel that I've learned in my career. Number one is to do the work that you love. I've already mentioned this, and it's sort of the same way, it's saying the same thing, but work from the inside out. And I'm going to quote one of my favorite people as my final say on this: follow your bliss. So thank you very much.
John, where was the house on Stilts?
The house on Stilts was down at Nag's Head, and sadly it burned to the water. It's no longer there. So I did truly preserve the memory of that place.
John, amazing collection of artists I didn't even know were in Richmond. How do you continue to get new folks, and where do you find the people that you're doing this series of portraits for the art?
Well, it's interesting because it's the kind of project where one thing leads to another. You know, the more artists I meet, the more they tell me, well, you haven't done so-and-so yet, have you? And I'm trying to expand, like the Petersburg idea is to expand to another area and another type of artist. Actually, I really am enjoying Petersburg because they get so little attention and so little appreciation that it's a pleasure to work with people who really appreciate what I'm doing. But yeah, it seems like it could go on for as long as I can do it, really.
Who has been your favorite person to photograph?
Wow, that's a tough one. I would say Myron Helfgott, because Myron is such a sagely person. I remember one time I asked Myron, I went to a show and he had filled up 2 floors of a gallery with work, and I asked him, I said, Myron, how long did it take you to do this work? Myron is almost 80 years old. He's in poor health. He's almost lost his voice, and he said, I did it all this year. And I said, Myron, how could you do this much work in 1 year? And he just looked at me and he kind of whispers, because he whispered, what else am I going to do? And I just thought that was the most brilliant thing. It's kind of sort of become a mantra of mine, really. Whenever my energy starts to flag, I say to myself, what else am I going to do? But as I said, that's a very difficult question to answer because these people are all fascinating people.
Hi. What's the craziest thing you've had to do to get the right shot? I see a lot of kind of water photos.
Well, let me go back to that very first picture of the guy painting the sky in New Mexico. I was there. I was shooting. I was shooting for tourism. I was shooting restaurants. I was shooting fashion shoots. I was shooting hotel rooms. But every morning, for the 5 days that I was there, every morning and every afternoon, we went back to that location, which, by the way, is where Lonesome Dove was filmed on that location. We left that big ladder there. Fortunately for me, the model was the account executive for the agency. Nice-looking guy. So, I mean, obviously, we couldn't afford to bring a model back 12 times or 10 times or whatever. But we went back every single day, and it was on the very last day that we got that sky, and the elements just came together perfectly. But I mean, nature photography is about, being there and being ready. So I don't know whether that's crazy, but it sort of is crazy, I guess, in a way. But I think it takes a certain personality to be able to do that sort of thing. But yeah, I mean, that's typical of that kind of work.
Hey, John, I have a question for you. Could you talk a little bit about collaboration? You mentioned how important that is in the current body of work, collaborating with artists. Could you speak to maybe how your approach to collaboration, your perspective about collaboration has evolved over the course of your career?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, when you come out of art school, you think everything is supposed to be coming from you and from. But when you work as a commercial photographer with talented people, you learn to collaborate, and in the end, you realize that everybody gets credit for it. If the art director loves the piece, then it's his piece. If I love the piece, it's my piece. Collaboration is what the smartest thing that a group of people could come up with. And of course that doesn't always work that way. I mean, if sometimes you're working with people who don't have good ideas, and that's more difficult. At that point, you have to learn to sort of do it their way and then do it your way, and hopefully, in the end, they realize your way was the better way. But yeah, collaboration is a great thing because the idea is to get the best photograph, right? So when I started photographing these artists, if they had a great idea, I jumped right on it. Gordon Stettinius owns that picture more than I do in a lot of ways. He said, let's take that picture down and I'll get in there and be that picture, and that makes that picture. So, but I get credit for it. So, yeah, it's very easy for me to collaborate.
Who or what inspired you to work from the inside out?
Well, the art director who told me that was just telling me to do what I'd been doing before I started doing commercial work. I was ruining my work by trying to work from the outside in. I was trying to be the Whitman sampler of photographers, and it's impossible to be good at everything, right? And it has to come from something deeper. So it just made sense to me.
Can you tell me, after having talked to so many artists, when you're taking pictures of nature and landscapes and you're just there,
and you're preserving something that you see as perfect. Does that feel different to you than, say, the artist that's a sculptor or a painter and is actually making something that they're imagining?
Yes and no. I mean, it's to me, pictures are pictures, you know, and in my portraits, most of them are environmental, so I'm fitting the artist into the scene in a similar way that I do outdoors. I think the difference is that there's like the yin and the yang of my personality, and you know, on the one hand, I would love to just spend a month talking to nobody and making photographs. On the other hand, I really like people, you know, so those two parts of my personality are satisfied by these two different kinds of work that I do. The actual photography, the only difference is rocks are more patient than people are, so.
Hi, your work is absolutely amazing. How have you put a price on your work as a photographer? If I am a consumer, how do you put a value on your artwork?
That's a tough question. You know, when you're working on assignments, somebody else puts a value on it. And sad to say, I've made more money making art for corporate people than I have doing my own work. I did a big job for VCU, the new children's hospital down on Broad Street. They paid me really well to do it, but that's decor for an office, so that's a different thing. As far as pricing art, yeah, I don't have much expertise in that. I'll tell you, I don't sell a lot of work, so I don't think I'm the right person to advise you on that.
John, one of the things you had said to me was you felt this sense of urgency to preserve the moments and the people in this area and basically your subject. So could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, thank you. I'm glad you brought that up. Yeah, I had some people that I studied with who I greatly admired. Did any of you go to VCU? Richard Carline, do you remember Richard Carline? He a brilliant man. Taught an art history class. There'd be 50 people signed up for the class. There'd be 90 people in the class. I mean, he was just a magnificent teacher. He died before I could photograph him. Jerry Donato is another one. And I started thinking about, you know, Willie Ann Wright is 90 years old. Francis Wessels is 99 years old. I don't want to miss that opportunity. I'm sort of on a mission, I have to say, and I'm not quite sure what the mission is, but I know I feel very, very compelled to photograph these people. Thank you all.